Today we are going to talk about Zora's new power-up and how Zora and Magna could be able to have trap spells prepared on paper many days in advance so that they can now be used in battle without wasting any mana. Black Clover Chapter 292 review here on Yami. Black Clover Chapter 292 confirms that our prediction that Magna asked Zora to teach him trap magic was correct. And that's what this chapter is all about. First, a word about the last chapter review when we said that Magna can most likely steal Dante's magic power. Some people said we were wrong. First, remember that we publish our first impression before we even have the translation of the chapter. And second, we just didn't know how exactly the power works, so we kept the explanation as general as possible to not make any mistake. Obviously, Magna must somehow have to benefit from Dante's absorbed magic, because Dante has lost a lot of magic power, and due to the chains that connect their souls, it is logical that Magna can somehow use the stolen magic power. How exactly Magna's new trap spell works is that both his and his opponent's souls are connected, and both magic powers are added together and then divided equally between them. Thus, Magna and his opponent have the same magic power. This allows Magna to fight against the strongest opponents. This is extremely strong when you consider that theoretically he could fight Lucifero as well. And this bothers me a bit because Magna is way too strong with this technique. It just doesn't feel right. And don't get me wrong, I think Magna deserves to be strong, mostly because it is the only way he can ever compete with a stronger opponent, at least for now. But it still sounds too good to be true. First, let's be clear, even though Magna is capable of stealing magic power, and therefore mana, his variety of spells is still the same. So if he were to fight someone with, for example, water magic, he would still have an elemental disadvantage, so that the magic attributes and the variety of spells still affects the outcome of the fight. This is important to understand as it makes Magna's new power-up way more realistic. We should still keep in mind that Magna might be able to change the nature of his magic attribute depending on the nature of his opponent's magic. That is, if he absorbs Dante's magic, for example, he may be able to use some kind of fireballs with the property of gravity. This is of course not yet confirmed, and we have not been able to see if his actual magic has been changed in any way by Dante's magic power. However, we need to consider this possibility. On the other hand, however, this could also be the case for his opponents, since his opponent also receives some of Magna's magic power, even if it is extremely low in the case of Dante, as we can see in this illustration. Maybe it's so low that it won't even be noticeable, but in the case of Magna, he's using so much magic power of his opponent and therefore using a lot more foreign mana than his own mana. Therefore I expect a change in his actual magic attribute fire, just like it is the case with Ladros when he absorbs the mana of others. We must remember that Magna works with far more foreign magical power than his own. I would like this to be noticeable when he uses actual spells. But enough about Magna and his new power, let's go to the new Black Clover Chapter 292 review. There's not much to say. We see Magna literally begging Zora to teach him trap magic. Zora then teaches Magna everything he knows. And by everything I mean, damn, this man is a freak. Check out his room, this man looks like he's into conspiracy shit, what the Bro, if this shit is real, we haven't seen much of Zora yet. I mean, it's not that Magna just pulled this type of technique out of nowhere. Of course, Magna certainly made this trap his own technique by modifying it with his own magic. But the trap itself has to be from Zora's studies. And we haven't seen such a soul trap from Zora. So there are definitely other trap spells that Zora either hasn't used or mastered. Plus, it looks like Zora and Magna are actually using runes for their trap magic. This is interesting because it leaves open the possibility that one day they will be able to use the mana method and even the ultimate magic. Especially Magna, if he uses Dante's magic power, should be able to control runes and thus master the mana method and possibly even the ultimate magic. Unfortunately, he never learned how to use the mana method or the ultimate magic, but this is definitely something for the future. However, that's a completely different topic. Back to Zora. We actually know that Zora not only taught Magna but also trained for himself, because even before Magna went to the Heart Kingdom to learn the runes, Zora was already regularly leaving the Black Bull base to do something secretly. But what could Zora have tried to learn? Based on Zora's room, it seems that Zora was trying to master a technique or even several techniques that he just couldn't master before. I don't think he came up with anything new. The typical approach for characters like Zora is usually that they haven't mastered a certain secret technique that is extremely powerful. We believe that Zora used these 6 months to learn such a technique that he has not yet mastered. It would be cool if this technique was invented by his father, but he too couldn't master it.
Due to the fact that Zora used the type of ruins, we can assume that because ruins are always associated with mana and magic absorption, such as the mana method of the Heart Kingdom or Magna's soul trap, that Zora too has learned a technique that has something to do with mana or magic absorption. One possibility is for him to cast a trap spell enhanced with ruins on himself that allows him to absorb natural mana, just like Magna. But instead of attaching a second trap to his opponents, Zora actually absorbs natural mana directly. That would be very cool and similar to the Heart Kingdom's mana method. We'd love to see this, as this would also give Magna the ability to use natural mana without using the same technique over and over again. After all, ruins are ruins, and therefore trap spells enhanced with ruins should be similar to the mana method of the Heart Kingdom. This would add a little more variety to keep the fights interesting. In addition to this, Zora could also have a technique in which he places the traps on his opponents, and instead of absorbing the mana from nature, the trap could simply lower his opponent's mana by releasing the mana from the opponent's body into the nature. In this way, the trap would continuously drain the enemy's magic as long as it is placed on the enemy. And that would be a really cool technique. The next possibility is very likely, as this concept is used in many other animes. Zora might be able to put a trap on his opponent like Magna, but instead of balancing their magic power, it could result in any damage done being split equally between himself and his opponent. Obviously, this is more of a kamikaze technique and shouldn't be used if it can be avoided. But still, something I can imagine Zora would use if he didn't see any other option. By the way, this same goes for Magna, as this is his typical fighting style. Remember how he fought against Elf Luck? In the end, we would like to introduce you to an idea that will be very useful for both Magna and Zora. We know that trap spells can be placed and then can be activated at specific times, either when whoever plays the trap activates them or whenever it's triggered by physical contact. Due to the fact that mana is required to place trap spells, both Zora and Magna are very limited in using these traps in a battle. However, considering how trap spells work, that they can be placed until activated, Magna and Zora have the possibility to prepare traps, as Zora already did at the Royal Knight exam. But instead of placing the traps in the environment, they could put the traps down on a piece of paper many days or even months in advance. These traps can be activated in a battle. How this works is that they put the traps on paper with their mana and keep all those trap-filled papers in their grimoire bag. And when fighting an opponent, they can take the papers out as they would normally take out their grimoire and activate the trap spells that they have prepared days in advance without using any more mana. I think this would be a brilliant idea. And if we take a closer look at Zora's room, we can actually see a large amount of papers, some of which are sealed with a line and some of which look like they are even in a package. Some of these papers are definitely research and information, but perhaps they are already trap spells prepared that Zora has been preparing for many years. This would be a really amazing thing. Besides that, it's very unlikely that Magna can defeat Dante, especially without help. After all, Dante is the leader of the Dark Triad and is possessed by one of the rulers of the underworld. So, how will this fight go on? Zora will most likely have to step in and help Magna fight Dante, and then we will see Zora's new power. To do this, Magna has to admit that he cannot defeat Dante on his own, and this will only be possible if something happens that gives Dante the upper hand again. There are two possibilities. Option 1. Dante or someone else can destroy the trap spell and Magna cannot use it a second time due to his lack of mana. This can happen if, for example, the second gate opens, which could make Dante a bit stronger again, considering that each gate may restrict his devil power a little, and thus Dante becomes stronger with every new gate that has opened. Option 2. Lucifera will take over Dante's body just as Magicula took over Vanika's body to protect her from the Eternal Prison spell when Sekre try to seal her. In this way, the chain may not be connected to Lucifero's soul, but only to Dante's, and therefore allows Lucifero to drain Dante's mana and magical power, which would automatically make Magna weaker as well. Whether this is actually possible really depends on Tabata and how the true nature of the trap spell works. This can only work when Lucifero's soul is in Dante's body and not in his physical body in the underworld. Here too, it depends on Tabata, but when the moment comes when Magna will be at a disadvantage, Zora will definitely step in and then they will fight together. So that's it for today, folks. Hope you guys enjoyed our video, and if you did, don't forget to smash the like button, and if you are new to our channel, make sure you subscribe with the notification bell turned on. See you guys in the next video. Yami out.